Hello, everyone. Welcome to part 4 of the home buying timeline. I'm Mac, the son.
I'm Becca, the mom.
Last episode, we were able to discuss concessions, and now we have the opportunity to discuss home inspections and appraisals. So, when do home inspections actually happen? Because obviously, with the timeline that we're talking about, I'm assuming it's after the offer and everything within that.
Yep, after the offer gets accepted.
Okay.
And then, so usually, like in my brain, I'm thinking, okay, what's next? So you make the offer, it gets accepted, make sure the earnest money is in. That's the next step. Inspections are usually the next step.
Gotcha.
Sometimes the appraisal is happening all at the same time, but I don't usually like to have the appraisal happening until after the inspection's done.
Okay.
I feel like that helps protect my buyer from not having to pay for an appraisal, because sometimes you don't buy the house because of the inspection.
And does a home inspection cost it as well, or how does that work?
Yeah, so the home inspections, like down here in Arizona and in Idaho, they range between like $375 and $500. It's depending on how big the home is.
Gotcha.
If it's more square footage, it's going to cost a little bit more. If it's a multi-unit, it'll cost per unit, but less than like a whole home.
Right.
So it just varies depending on the actual property that you're getting inspected. But in that timeline, they usually, I like to have like 10 days, but sometimes the seller wants it to happen quicker, because if they're going to take the home on the market, they don't want to wait 10 days to know if you're going to back out during inspection or not.
That makes sense.
So it could vary between 2 days to 20 days, just depending on whatever the offer is.
And the home inspection is paid for by this buyer.
The buyer. The buyer owns the inspection.
Okay. So what is the purpose of a home inspection?
The reason why the buyer owns it is because the inspector is going in for the buyer on the buyer's behalf to be able to tell them if there's anything wrong with the home, if there's any safety issues, if there's something. It's all the things that you possibly can't see with the naked eye just from looking at it. The inspector kind of wants to go through and just nitpick the house and make sure that it's good for you to purchase and disclose to you anything that possibly could be bad about the house.
So let's say something bad does come up on the inspection. The inspector comes back and says, hey, there's a problem with this, whatever it may be. What happens then?
So I have super good inspectors that I work with all the time, and they really, really try hard to put the buyer's mind at ease with most things. But if there is something that we're saying is bad, right? I don't like to use that term, but if it is something that's bad, then they disclose or they talk to the buyer about possible repair options or possible things that could happen in the future. For instance, just last week I did a home inspection and there was a broken seal on the window. And sometimes those broken seals will start getting moisture inside the window and then they become less effective. He just explains those things to the buyer, and the buyer has the opportunity to decide if they want the seller to fix it, or if they would like, or if they just know they're going to need to kind of have a little nest egg to fix it for themselves in the future.
So is there ever a time when should a buyer really be concerned with something that comes up on the inspection?
Oh, that's such a good question. I wish my buyers asked that question. I hope I'm educating them well enough, but at the end of the day, I call it a glorified honey-do list. Your inspection is kind of like a list to go down of things that you may want to fix in your home, unless they're big ticket items. So for instance, your furnace, your water heaters, your, because in Arizona, we actually have multiple water heaters lots of times, in like your roof, anything structural that could potentially be a big issue. Concrete is kind of a big one too, especially if there's tripping hazards with it and stuff like that. So those big ticket items, what I love about the inspectors is they'll kind of highlight those in red if there's safety issues or there's a real problem. And then everything else will kind of be yellow, which is like cautionary for future, and then green for like, I'm going to mention it, but it's not that big of a deal.
Gotcha.
So just to protect them also as a home inspector, right? Because they don't want people moving in and finding like a bad electrical outlet and the buyer being like, hey, why did they miss that?
Yeah.
And so those big ticket items are the things that we usually are discussing in the process to ask the seller to help us with, either like money or price off the list price, or we can also ask them to repair it.
Gotcha. And so when you do get the report back,
Mhm.
obviously sometimes it can be large, I'd imagine. It's easy to look through the most important parts of it when it's color
Mhm.
coordinated in that way.
Yeah, the inspectors do a really, really good job. And when you do a home inspection, a new buyer does a home inspection. Usually the inspector takes 3 to 4 hours to conduct an inspection.
Hmm.
And during that inspection, they'll tell the buyer to show up like 15, 20 minutes before he's done. They can walk the house again, and then he can
Oh,
walk the property with them and show them on the report. Now everything's digital. They have
yeah.
the pictures loaded and all that stuff. Full color pictures, and they can show them exactly what's wrong and what they need to be looking for and what he looked for and what he
Mhm.
found.
So let's say there is something that's major, right? That can
Mhm.
be a serious concern for the buyer. What let's say they don't want to purchase a house anymore because of the fact
Mhm.
that, it just feels too much for them and they can't handle whatever the problem may be. And so they do want to back out. Obviously the earnest money's been paid, the offer's been accepted. How does that work?
If they decide that they're going to terminate the contract, that's the word we use, terminate. They're going to terminate the contract because of those things. Then we terminate with a piece of paper, and both parties have to agree to it.
Mm,
And then the buyer can get their earnest money back. It's always a sad day when that happens, but it
yeah.
actually happens, periodically. And I always recommend that they at least ask for all the things that they'd like done that are serious items and just see if the seller is willing
Right.
to. But every once in a while, sometimes there's too much that they can't move past, that there's too many repairs in the home.
Mhm.
Or it feels daunting to I have
Yeah.
especially first-time home buyers, they don't even know how to switch an outlet, they don't know how to paint, like, they've just never done any of these home repairs. So, home repairs are daunting to a lot of people.
For sure, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that you'd prefer to wait for the home inspection to be done and complete and then move on to appraisals.
Mhm.
So let's move on to appraisals now. Let's say, the home inspection's been completed and it's been
Mhm.
passed and the buyers are comfortable with everything that's on there.
Mhm.
What happens now with appraisals?
So appraisals are paid for also by the buyer. The buyer pays for the appraisal. It will come out of their closing costs. And if they've asked the seller to pay for closing costs, that can get
Mm,
reimbursed to the buyer.
gotcha.
But it does initially come out from the buyer. They pay for their appraisal. The appraisal actually is the lender. The appraiser's working for the lender at this point. He's working for the bank
Mm.
and the buyer to make sure that the home is priced correctly for what the offer has been made
So is
for.
a appraiser working with whatever bank the
Mhm.
buyer is working with for that
Yeah.
lender?
So the buyer can't hire the appraiser, neither can the bank.
Oh.
The bank puts it out to multiple he puts it out to a platform, and then an inspector or an appraiser will pick it up. And
Oh.
they can't even choose the appraiser. It just gets too tricky, and it feels
Yeah.
that's what was kind of happening during that crash period. There was a lot of banks that were like, "Hey, I'll send this appraiser because I know he'll give me
Mhm.
a bigger price so we can make that loan a little bit higher for the buyer."
So the biggest difference between, a home inspector and an appraiser is a home inspector is going to inspect and making sure that the house is in check and in order,
Mhm.
and then the home appraiser is just making sure that it is worth the value that is
Mhm.
being offered.
Yeah, super simply said.
Yeah, and should that ever be a big concern for the buyer or seller, considering the realtor should have handled that process of making sure that the price is, you know, doable with or the price is comparable to other houses in the
Mhm.
area?
Yeah, because those are the comparables that the appraiser is using also to
Right.
make sure that that home is priced correctly. If the realtor, the listing agent, has done a good job pricing the home, great.
Mhm.
But really, at the end of the day, the buyer's agent should make sure that they're not overpaying for that house by doing their own research, which is super helpful if the appraisal actually comes in lower or higher, the realtor can try to even battle the
Oh,
appraisal
really?
with comparables that they have. And sometimes the
Mm.
appraisers have called me and said, "I'm not getting this price. Where did you," like, especially if I'm the
Right.
listing agent, "Hey, where is there something you can show me that can help me?" And yeah, so we'll kind of help the appraiser find some comparables. That gets a little
Mm.
tricky, but sometimes that does happen. Like they're having a hard time finding comparables for the house and getting the price. The appraiser tries really, really hard.
Mhm.
Appraisals usually come in right at or just above.
Mm.
It rarely comes in way over. I just had one, my new little first time home buyer, just like a couple months ago when they bought. Theirs actually came in about 10 grand higher.
Oh,
And it was
wow.
so fun to see them know they already had that much equity.
Yeah.
So that was fun. And
That's
we
really
knew we
cool.
got a really good price on the house.
Yeah. So what happens if a home does come in and it's listed, not at the appraised price,
Mhm.
and there aren't necessarily comparable prices to combat it?
Yeah, so if the appraisal comes in lower than what we've offered for it, the bank will only lend on the appraised price.
Mm.
So there's a gap, and we have to figure out what to do with that gap. So if that gap is something that the seller's willing to come down to the price,
Mhm.
typically I would say that that's what happens. But sometimes the buyer has to come in with that gap if they really want the house and the seller's not willing to come down on his bottom line.
Well, how often does that happen?
I probably a handful, probably 5 times in my whole time doing that, um, have we had to really negotiate tough. There's been a couple that have been discrepancies of like 1,000 to
Mhm.
$3,000. We usually can negotiate those out pretty good. But if we've got a $10,000 gap,
Yeah.
it gets a little tricky. During the crazy time of real estate, during some of our offers, we actually would offer that the buyer was willing to pay for any appraisal gap
Wow.
because they were going way higher over list price to get the house
Oh.
in a competitive situation.
So they're already receiving extra, essentially.
Yeah, so the buyer, because they wanted the house so badly, they would offer to pay for that appraisal gap if there was one.
Mm. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in for part 4 of our home buying timeline. We're really excited for the next episode. Again, if you ever have any questions or any concerns, please reach out. We're more than willing to help. My mom is definitely more than willing to answer any questions, but we'll see you in the next one.